My name is Adrian Keller, Assistant District Attorney, widow, and apparently, the only person in my family who still understands what respect for the dead means. The night it happened, I wasn't thinking about cases or justice, I was thinking about dinner. I had just wrapped up a plea hearing and wanted to honor Mark's memory the way he'd loved best, with a meal by the ocean. I'd spent $400 at the fish market that morning: lobster, crab, corn, the works, and I was ready to cook, light the candles, and remind my daughter that her father was more than the man in the folded flag on the mantel. When I opened the door, the house smelled like butter and salt. For one hopeful second, I thought Brenda had started cooking for us. Then I saw Penny sitting at the counter, her small legs swinging, a half-frozen corn dog in her hand. "Sweetheart," I asked, keeping my voice steady, "why are you eating that?" She didn't look up. "Aunt Brenda said you were busy." "Dinner's outside." Something inside me snapped tight. I crossed the living room and stopped cold at the sliding glass door. Through it, I could see Brenda and her husband Hank on the balcony, laughing with their boys as they tore into a mountain of bright red shells. The serving platters I'd bought glistened under the lantern light, butter dripping from ramekins, corn piled high. The stock pot I'd packed in the trunk sat steaming in the center of the table. They were eating my dinner. Every bit of it. The humid air hit me like a wave when I slid the door open. "Enjoying yourselves," I said, the words cutting through their laughter. Brenda looked up, unfazed, and smiled like she was doing me a favor. "You're just in time," she said lightly. "We started without you." I walked closer, my eyes falling on the pot. It rested on something dark and folded beneath it, the corners damp and shining. My pulse spiked. "What's under the pot?" "Oh, that." Brenda gestured lazily with a crab cracker. "Just that flag thing from your box." I couldn't find a trivet. My voice broke out sharper than I intended. "That flag thing is Mark's burial flag." She blinked, chewing slowly. "Well, it's thick fabric, and he's not exactly using it anymore." Hank chuckled, wiping butter off his chin. "Jesus. Adrian. He's dead." "Let it go." The noise around me dimmed. I could only hear my heart pounding and the faint hiss of butter sizzling against metal. "You used my husband's flag as a hot pad," I said, each word precise, deliberate. Brenda rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's not ruined. It'll wash out." I took another step forward, feeling my breath shake. "You broke into my memory box for this." Her shrug was infuriating. "Relax. It was just sitting there collecting dust." I looked at the box she'd left open on the side table. The brass latch was bent, splinters at the edge where she'd pried it open. Mark's badge lay face down on the deck, his photo half buried under a napkin. "You had no right to touch that," I said, my voice shaking now for the first time all night. Brenda set her crab leg down and sighed. "Adrian, you make everything sacred. It's exhausting." Hank leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You want to know what's exhausting? Watching you play the grieving widow for 3 years straight." The words hit like a slap. "You don't get to say his name," I said coldly. "You don't get to mock the man who ran into burning buildings while you hide behind your wife's money." He stood up, towering over me. "Careful," he said, his tone low, almost amused. "You might forget who owes who here." Brenda shot him a look that told me everything. They'd already discussed it, the unspoken threat that had hung over me for years. "Don't pretend you're better than us," she said, wiping her hands on a linen napkin. "We're in this together. Remember, your signatures on that affidavit? You helped me get my kids into your district school. You expose me. You expose yourself." For a moment, no one spoke. I felt the weight of the sea air, the sting of salt on my tongue. Then I bent down, picked up Mark's badge from the deck, and wiped the sand off with my sleeve. My hands had stopped trembling. I placed it gently back into the broken box, closed the lid over the splintered edge, and straightened. "You've already done your damage," I said quietly. "Now get the hell off my balcony." Brenda's smile faltered. "Adrian, no." I cut her off. "You desecrated his flag. You fed your family with what I bought for mine. That's all the family I need to see tonight." Hank scoffed but didn't argue. I turned, walked back inside, and shut the sliding door behind me with a sound that echoed like a verdict. Penny was still at the counter, her eyes wide, tears balanced on her lashes. I forced a calm breath. "Come here, sweetheart," I said softly. She slid off the stool, and I brushed her hair from her face. "We'll make something else. Something warm." I reached for the eggs and bread, my movements steady, methodical. Outside, laughter started again, faint but hollow now. I cooked in silence, plating 2 slices of toast and eggs sunny side up. Penny whispered, "Mom, are you mad?" I met her eyes. "Not mad, baby," I said. "Just done." When she smiled weakly and took the first bite, I looked out the window. The flag lay under that pot, its stars already stained gold. That was the moment the line drew itself in my mind thin. Final. Unbreakable. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I would make them regret ever thinking I was powerless. Justice wasn't something I chased in a courtroom tonight. It started right there, between the grease, the laughter, and the silence that followed. 3 years of silence bought by blackmail. That's what it had been. Every family dinner, every holiday, every forced smile was just another payment toward their control. I'd told myself I kept quiet for Penny's sake, that stability was safer than truth. But that was a lie. The truth was, fear had become its own kind of cage, one I'd built with my own signature. I still remember the night Brenda first cornered me. 6 months after Mark's funeral. We were standing in my kitchen, her voice syrup-sweet as she poured herself a glass of wine. "You want to do something good for the boys, don't you?" she'd said, waving a pen like a magic wand. "Just sign this affidavit. It's a formality. Really. It'll let them enroll in your district. They deserve a good school." I'd barely read the document before I signed, grief still fogging every thought. When the guilt hit a week later, I tried to back out. Brenda had just smiled and said, "Too late, darling. You're already in it with me." 6 months after that, she reminded me again, whispering into the phone like she was sharing a secret. "We're in the same boat now. You don't want that boat to sink, do you?" I'd laughed nervously then, pretending she was joking, but her tone had gone flat. "If anyone finds out, you lose your license, your job, your health insurance. You really want that for Penny?" That single sentence became her weapon of choice. Every time I hinted at boundaries, every time I said no, she'd pull the pin and drop it like a grenade. "We wouldn't want the district sniffing around your address, would we?" she'd say, smiling over dinner as if we were sharing inside jokes. I learned to swallow my pride, to keep my voice soft, to stay manageable. I told myself it was temporary. That family would come around. They never did. By the time I caught her standing over Mark's flag, I realized what I'd become: useful, compliant, silent. The perfect Mark. That night, after cleaning the grease stain from the fabric until my knuckles bled, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at Penny sleeping. She had his face, his steadiness, his quiet strength. I whispered, "You deserve better than this." "So do I." The next morning, Brenda texted me like nothing had happened. Asterisk, Remember to stay quiet about school records. The district's doing random checks this fall. Asterisk. My fingers hovered over the phone. I typed. Asterisk. Got it. Asterisk. And hit send. My face calm. My pulse steady. For the first time, I wasn't agreeing out of fear. I was agreeing because she'd just told me exactly where to start cutting. The morning after that text, I stopped being afraid. Fear had always felt like armor, but it was really a leash, and I was done wearing it. I spent the next week pretending to be the same quiet sister, answering Brenda's calls, laughing when she bragged about her sales, agreeing when she told me she'd taken care of the school forms for the boys again. Every yes I gave her became another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. I started small, methodical. Every message she sent, I saved and printed. Every voicemail that hinted at our arrangement, I archived and backed up twice. The night she texted, asterisk, keep those forms safe. I'll need a copy next year. Asterisk, I took a screenshot before she could delete it. I even photographed the flag, the grease stains, the broken latch, the crumpled wrapping on the deck. Each image was a crime scene, and Brenda didn't even know she'd already confessed. The hardest part was acting normal around Penny. She'd ask, Mom, are we still seeing Aunt Brenda next weekend? And I'd smile. Maybe, I'd say, tucking her hair behind her ear. Inside, I was memorizing every manipulation, every slight, every moment that had turned my grief into their leverage. I wasn't collecting proof for revenge. I was building a defense. I knew how fragile reputations could be. In my job, one accusation could burn down a career. I couldn't afford mistakes. By the third week, I called the union office under a different tone than I used in court. This is Adrian Keller, I said. I need to speak with a representative. It's urgent. The woman on the other end hesitated. Are you filing a grievance? No, I said. I'm being blackmailed by a family member, and I need protection before I report it. There was a pause, a sharp intake of air. Then, come in tomorrow at 9. We'll help you. The next morning, I left Penny with Aunt Lana. She took one look at me and said, Whatever storm you're walking into, don't forget your thunder. I almost smiled. I won't. The union office was smaller than I'd imagined, fluorescent lights, faded carpet, the smell of burnt coffee, but it felt safer than home. Diane Miller was waiting for me, silver hair pulled into a knot, glasses hanging from a chain. She shook my hand firmly. Let's get straight to it, she said. I told her everything. How Brenda had coerced me after Mark's death. How she dangled the fraud like a weapon. How the flag incident had been the final straw. By the time I was done, my throat ached. Diane didn't interrupt once. She just sat back, folded her hands, and said, You're not a co-conspirator, Adrian. You're a victim of coercion. I laughed, bitter and tired. I'm a prosecutor, Diane. Victims are who I represent, not what I am. She leaned forward. Then represent yourself. But this time, you'll win. When she said the word times immunity, asterisk, it took me a second to understand. You mean, I keep my license? I asked quietly. And your job, she said. If you cooperate, if you bring them everything, the district will protect you as a whistleblower. They can't punish you for coming forward. My hands shook, but not from fear. So Brenda loses everything, and I walk away clean. Diane smiled, slow and deliberate. Justice doesn't get cleaner than that. By the time I left, the plan was already moving. Diane would call the district's HR director, schedule a meeting, and frame it exactly as it was, a widow blackmailed by her sister. I sat in my car afterward, watching the sunlight hit the courthouse across the street. I'd spent my career fighting for other people's justice. But this was mine. For once, the law wasn't a shield I was hiding behind. It was a blade I finally knew how to use. That night, Brenda called to gloat about a new listing she'd closed. "See, things always work out when we stick together," she said brightly. I smiled into the phone. "You're right," I said. "Some partnerships are just unbreakable." She laughed, oblivious. When I hung up, I looked at the folder in my lap, 30 pages of evidence and one stained flag folded neatly inside. The trap was set. All I had to do now was let her walk straight into it. The morning of the first day of school felt heavier than any courtroom I'd ever walked into. The air carried that early autumn edge, crisp and electric, as if the whole town was holding its breath. I'd already dropped Penny off before the rush, kissed her forehead, and told her to have a great day. She had no idea what kind of storm her mother had just set in motion. I parked in the faculty lot, coffee cooling in my hand, my eyes fixed on the front gate. At exactly 7:28, Brenda's white SUV rolled into the drop-off lane, gleaming like it owned the place. I could almost hear her playlist from here, some upbeat nonsense about family and success. Her boys piled out, backpacks slung over their shoulders, laughing without a clue. Brenda stepped out next, sunglasses perched high, every movement dripping with confidence. She waved to another parent like she was the PTA president. I smiled into my coffee cup. Showtime. Marcus, the older one, swiped his student card first. The scanner light blinked red. He frowned. Tried again. Red. Access denied flashed on the small digital screen above the gate. Daniel stepped up behind him, swiping his card like it would fix everything. Red again. Access denied. Brenda's smile faltered as murmurs rippled through the drop-off line. "What's going on?" she called out, striding toward the gate. The boys turned, helpless. As the crowd began to notice, that was when Officer Reynolds stepped out of the admin building, his uniform sharp, his presence unmistakable. The principal, Mrs. Hendricks, followed close behind, her expression carved from stone. "Ma'am," Officer Reynolds said, voice steady but firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the gate." Brenda blinked, incredulous. "Excuse me, my sons go here. There's clearly a system error." Mrs. Hendricks didn't blink. "There's no error. Mrs. Harlow. These students have been removed from our system due to residency fraud." For a moment, no one moved. Then Brenda laughed, high and brittle. "That's ridiculous. We've been enrolled here for 3 years. The principal's tone didn't waver. Under false documentation. Effective immediately. Your children are unenrolled. They are no longer permitted on district property." The line of parents had stopped moving altogether now. Phones were out. Cameras were rolling. I could see the panic beginning to creep up Brenda's throat, the cracks spreading through her perfect facade. She turned to the officer, voice pitching higher. "This is insane. Who told you this? Who would make up something so cruel?" Officer Reynolds stayed unmoved. "The district verified the documentation. The investigation is complete." Brenda's head whipped around like she was searching for someone to blame. "Adrian," she shouted suddenly, scanning the parking lot, "tell them this is a mistake." From where I sat in my car, I took a long sip of coffee and didn't move. Mrs. Hendricks stepped forward, holding a large manila envelope with the district seal on it. "This is your formal notice of disenrollment and repayment," she said, extending it. Brenda snatched it, hands trembling as she tore it open. I could see her eyes darting across the page. her lips moving as she read the total $45,000 owed in tuition recovery. Her face went pale, then red. "You can't do this," she screamed. "You can't just throw my kids out." Officer Reynolds's hand hovered near his radio. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." "You don't understand," she shouted, clutching the papers. "My sister works here. She'll fix this." "Mrs." Hendrix's eyes were cold. "Mrs. Keller has already given her full statement to the district. And this," she gestured to the paperwork, "is the outcome." The words hit harder than any gavel. Around them, the whispers grew louder, phones capturing every second. Brenda's sons stood frozen, eyes wide, humiliation written all over their faces. "Get in the car," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Now." Marcus hesitated. "Mom, what's happening?" "Nothing," she barked. "Get in the damn car." They obeyed, stumbling toward the SUV as the officer guided them back to the lane. Brenda lingered a second longer, eyes burning across the parking lot like she could set me on fire by will alone. I just watched. Calm, detached, steady. When she slammed the door and the SUV peeled out of the lot, the crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring like a courtroom after a verdict. I stayed still, watching her taillights vanish down the road. For years, she'd ruled every family gathering, every conversation, every choice I made. But in less than 5 minutes, in front of half the district, her empire had collapsed. The flag she'd defiled couldn't be unsoiled, but this was its retribution. Later that morning, as the school day began, a few teachers whispered in the lounge. "Did you hear what happened?" one asked. "Something about fake residency." Another shook her head. "I heard her sister works here." "Can you imagine?" I smiled faintly and stirred my coffee. "People always imagine," I said softly. "But the truth doesn't need imagination. It just needs timing." By lunch, the story had spread across the county. Parents were sharing videos, tagging the district, demanding statements. Brenda's name trended on local forums. Every headline spelled her downfall in neat, factual lines. Asterisk local realtor exposed for residency fraud. District pursuing $45,000 restitution. Asterisk I didn't need to say a word. Justice had already spoken publicly. Perfectly. And irrevocably. They showed up at sunset like a mob dressed as family. 2 cars in the driveway. Doors slamming hard enough to rattle my windows. I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting them since the videos hit Facebook that afternoon. I left the porch light off and waited for the first knock. It came fast, 3 sharp bangs, followed by Hank's voice bellowing, "Open the damn door." "Adrian." I took my time, smoothing my shirt before turning the knob. Walter was at the front, red-faced and trembling with anger. Marilyn hovered behind him, lips pressed into that familiar mask of martyrdom. Brenda looked wrecked, makeup streaked. Eyes wild, but she still managed to point at me like I was the criminal. "You did this," she spat. "You humiliated me in front of the entire town." I met her glare with silence, then stepped aside. "Come in," I said evenly. "You've already burned my peace. Might as well finish the job inside." They stormed into the living room, voices colliding in accusation. Walter barked, "We raised you better than this. Family doesn't destroy family." Marilyn added sharply, "You should have come to us, not the district." Brenda's sobs turned theatrical. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We're being sued. Adrian, $45,000. They're talking about seizing our home." Hank was pacing, fists clenching. "You think you can just walk away clean? Your signature's on that affidavit too." I waited until the shouting dulled into angry breathing. then walked to the coffee table. The folder sat there, 30 pages of printed messages, every one stamped with time and date. I dropped it in front of them with a thud. "You want to talk about signatures?" I said quietly. "Start reading." Every text where Brenda threatened me. Every reminder to stay quiet. Every threat about losing my license if I spoke up. Hank's face blanched as he flipped through the pages. "This doesn't prove anything," he muttered. "It proves everything," I said. "Blackmail, coercion, fraud. All documented. And just so you know, the district already granted me immunity." Brenda's sobs stopped instantly. "You, what?" I looked at her. "Steady. You heard me. I went to the union. I told them everything. They protected me because I came forward first. You can't touch me anymore." Marilyn stepped forward, voice trembling. "Adrian, we can fix this. Family forgives." I cut her off. Sharp. "Family doesn't use a dead man's flag as a potholder." Walter's mouth opened, then shut again. The silence that followed felt colder than the ocean in December. Hank slammed his hand on the table. "We'll sue you for defamation." I leaned in, my voice low enough to make him step back. "Try it. The moment you do, those messages go to the district attorney. Blackmail's a felony in this state. Do you want to test me?" "Hank." He said nothing. Brenda was shaking now, whispering, "We'll lose everything." I straightened. "You already did. You just didn't notice until it was public." No one moved as I walked to the door and opened it wide. "Get out," I said softly. "All of you." Marilyn hesitated, tears in her eyes. "Adrian, please get out." My voice didn't rise, but it was final. They left one by one, shuffling past like mourners leaving a grave they dug themselves. When the door clicked shut, I locked it and leaned against the frame, breathing in the silence they'd stolen from me years ago. For the first time, it felt like mine again. A week later, the house felt different, quieter, lighter, as if someone had lifted a curtain that had blocked the air for years. Penny came home waving a letter from school, her eyes bright. "Mom, I got into the advanced program," she said, breathless. I smiled, fighting the sting in my chest. "You earned it, sweetheart. Every bit of it." She threw her arms around me, whispering, "We're free now." "Right." I kissed the top of her head. "Completely." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I stood by the fireplace and looked at the memory box on the mantel. The flag was still stained, the mark dark and permanent across the fabric. For a long time, I used to see it as a wound, proof of what they'd ruined. But now, it looked like something else, a reminder that I'd survived it. I whispered, "We're okay. Mark. She can't touch us anymore." The quiet felt sacred. Later, Aunt Lana came for dinner, bringing lemon pie and laughter. Over glasses of wine, she looked at me and said, "You finally stopped surviving, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yeah," I said softly. I started living. And for once, the word didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like the truth. Some nights I still wake up expecting the weight of fear, but all I find is quiet. The kind that doesn't demand silence, it rewards it. I look at the flag on the mantel, its stain catching the last light of dusk, and I smile. "We're home," I whisper. Not to Mark, not even to Penny, but to myself. It's strange how peace sounds nothing like forgiveness. It sounds like freedom. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that strength isn't loud, it's steady. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.